Hi there, and thanks so much for joining us today. I'm going to show you how I made this Menagerie mix-up card and how I did the flip card, as you can see. We posted this on our blog a few days ago, and we've had lots of requests to see how to make it. So I wanted to show you how I did that. So first of all, we have the koala. In case you didn't know it, a koala is an animal that's native to Australia, and I use the Menagerie mix-up stamp set as well as the Menagerie dies to coordinate with that. But instead of making the koala, this time I thought I would make another Australian animal, the kangaroo. So I took a piece of cinnamon cider and I sampled with a few different shapes to see how close I could get it to the kangaroo face. So I used this sort of like football shape piece first of all, and that's the head. So because I was using photopolymer stamps, when I'm using photopolymer I try to always use the foam mat, and I find that it always gives a better impression rather than just stamping on a hard surface. So that's what I've done. Now the body that I've chosen to use is this body, as you can see on the screen. But one of the things about the kangaroo is that it is a marsupial. Now, what's a marsupial, you may be asking? Well, it's a mammal or an animal that carries its young in its pouch, and it's able to get all the nutrients and everything that it needs from inside its mother's pouch. And so I felt as though this body, there's two body types from Menagerie Madness that you can use, and I felt as though this one would be accurate. So I've just stamped that in Memento Black, and you'll see later on how I'm able to achieve the pouch. So after stamping the body, I'm going to stamp the head, and what I'm going to do now is try to create an accurate face. So I want to stamp the eyes, and the eyes that I'm going to use are the ones that look like they're closed. So they're like a half moon, and there's two of them. And I have to admit, sometimes it's difficult to find where those stamps are on the photopolymer sheet. So one of the good things that Stampin' Up! Have done is actually printed the image on the back of the plastic sheet that comes along with the photopolymer stamps. So one of the good things about photopolymer is that you can see through the block, you can see through the stamp, and so it's really easy to line up. So if you haven't used photopolymer stamps, they're excellent. Now what I'm going to do next is the ears, and a kangaroo has quite pointy ears, and so I found the correct ears to use. Now one of the things that you just notice is that they're a bit big for the size of the head that I'm using. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stamp them and cut them out using the coordinating die, but then I'm going to cut them and bring them closer together, and that will all make sense as we continue to watch this video. So I mentioned earlier that a kangaroo has a pouch. Now the way that these dies work is that there's one die that cuts out the overall body, and there's also another die that cuts out the internal part of the tummy, I guess you'd call it. So that explains why I'm stamping it twice. So I have one of those stamped images is going to be cut out, the whole body, and another one of those stamped images is the tummy. So that will all make sense. Now what I'm going to do now, you can see that I've got the new magnetic plate for the Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine, and I'm going to line up the dies where they are going to be cut out. So you can see I picked the wrong body, so that's the outline of the body that is going to be cut out. And then you can see the next die that I pick up is the head, so that's good. The next one that I am picking up is the ears. And so that comes out as one piece, which is excellent. And the last piece that I'm going to cut out is the tummy. And so you can see that's just a bit, just the inside part of the body. So the magnetic plate is really good. It's self-healing and it's magnetic, so the pieces don't move. So off camera, I've just cut those out. And you can see all of the pieces that I now have. Now I'm just going to take a moment to put the dies away. What you'll notice is that the sticky sheet that comes with the die originally, I've actually kept that. I've just found that it's easy to keep the sheet. On this collection, they actually have it printed, all of the dies, so that makes it easy to know where the pieces go. But as you can see now, the self-healing cutting mat, it's self-healing. So even though I've used it quite a bit, it doesn't look horrendous like they normally do. So what I'm going to be working on now is the face of the kangaroo. Now I've picked one of the small images that has the basically the chin, the nose, the mouth. That's one stamp that comes all together. So I've stamped that on using Memento Black onto a piece of Very Vanilla. And what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to stamp the head directly over the chin. So you can see what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just line it up just like that, and I'm going to stamp that in Memento Black, and then I'm going to cut it out using the coordinating die, but I'm actually going to trim it down again. I trimmed it down just so that it would look more like a chin, and I think it looks really cute. So you can see the look that I was trying to go for. So that's the head with the chin, and then the ears. So as you remember, I mentioned that they were a bit big. So what I'm going to do is just cut the middle part out, and using some washi tape, I'm actually going to stick them to the back of the head. So I've stuck the ears down, and now I'm just having a look to see how the chin looks, and I think that looks pretty cool. So what I'm going to do now is just put the head on the body and see how that looks, and I think that looks okay. Now as I'm just laying it out, I realize that the chin looks a bit big, so I'm just going to cut off the extra piece, as you can see, and that looks a bit better. So it just looks like a nice chin. So I mentioned earlier that we have the belly piece, and one of the things about a kangaroo is that a kangaroo has a pouch. So I'm actually just going to cut the bottom part off, and that is going to be my pouch. Now, aside from a pouch, one of the things that a kangaroo is known for is their tail. And so what I'm going to use is the balloon stamp, which is in the Menagerie Madness stamp set, and it has a coordinating die, and that is going to be my tail. So I'm just going to stamp it in Memento Black, and then I'm going to use the coordinating die and cut that out. So I've now cut that out, and as you can see, I didn't stamp it properly because it's not the whole balloon that I needed. It's really just the end bit of the balloon, the tail bit. And so the rest is not needed. So I'm just going to cut part of the balloon off, and I'll stick it to the back of the body. So now I have almost all of the pieces that are complete. So the final step is assembling these pieces all together. So I'm just going to take the chin and stick that onto the face, and then I'm going to take the head piece and stick that onto the body. So that looks pretty cute. Now the final piece that I need to do for the kangaroo is the pouch. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show something peeking out of the pouch, as you can just see on the screen as I've just shown. So I'm just going to take that small stamp, it looks like two little eyes, and I'm just going to stamp that using Memento Black onto a piece of Very Vanilla. So since this is a little baby living in its mother's pouch, it would still have ears, but they're small ears. So what I'm going to do is, instead of doing normal size ears, I'm going to use the same stamp that I used for the eyes, and I'm just going to bend them around the head of the little baby. And that's the beauty of using foliopolymer. You can actually bend the stamps. You can do it with sentiments, you can really do it with anything. But I just laid it over using the clear block, as you can see, and I'm just able to adjust it again because it wasn't bent just enough. And so I'm just going to stamp that using Memento Black, as you can see. And that's perfect. It's such a nice technique to be able to bend the stamps in that way. Now this is a shape that I've created, so there isn't a coordinating die for that. So I'm just going to cut it out, but remembering that it's going to be sticking out of the pouch. So I'm going to leave a little strip at the bottom, and I'm just going to fussy cut around the top of the head and the ears. So you can see how it's going to look with that little baby peeking out of its mummy's pouch. So I'm just going to stick that on the back using some washi tape. So now that the little baby has been stuck to the inside of its mummy's pouch, I'm just going to stick that down using some Tombow liquid adhesive. And then now that that has been stuck down, I can attach the head also using some Tombow adhesive. So now if I take my original card, on the cover there you can see the koala. That's where the kangaroo is going to go. But what we're going to look at now is this koala on the inside, and we'll go through how to make that. So for the koala's body, we've got this little one where his arms are crossed. This is the head piece, this is the nose piece, and these are the eyes that we're going to be using, and they're the ears that we're going to be using. So I'm just going to show this in fast motion now. We've gone through the process already with the kangaroo, so you can just watch me and listen to this cool music. So for the ears of the koala, there's a small part that is in petal pink, and so what I'm going to do is cut the ears out normally, and there's a special die that cuts out the inside of the ears. So now we have our koala and our kangaroo. From here, if you wanted to, you can assemble them to any type of card, but we're going to make this flip card. So what you can see now on the screen now is the frames, and this is taken from the Stitch So Sweetly dies. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this size of frame die, and that's the same size, and I'm going to cut it out off screen 4 times using Whisper White. So now what we're going to do is cut out part of the mechanism that allows for the flip. So I have my Stampin' Trimmer, which is excellent if you don't already use that, and because I want it to be a sturdy piece of cardstock, I've used thick Whisper White. Now, in terms of the sizes that I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to give these as metric measurements, but in the comments of this, the description comments of this YouTube video, I will provide a download which will have information about the size in imperial or feet and inches. So this piece that I've just cut out is 14.4 by 10 centimeters. What I'm now going to do is have a piece of designer series paper which is going to be stuck directly over the top of this, and the size of this is 14.2 by 9.8 centimeters. So as you can see, if I lay one over the other, it allows about approximately a 1 millimeter gap all the way around the outside, which is really nice. So as you can see, that's how the card will look once we have all the mechanisms in place. There's the kangaroo going to be on the front. Oh, the tail's a bit long. I might have to do some surgery on that later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, first of all, ensure that the designer series paper and the thick Whisper White cardstock are stuck together properly. So I'm going to stick that down using some trusty Tombow. You might be able to use some other of your favorite glue, but we really want to make sure that it's stuck, adhered pretty solidly. So now what we're going to cut is what I'm terming the pulley. So this is the little lever that sticks out the side, and again we want that to be extremely solid. We don't want it to be bending or anything like that. So I'm using a thick Whisper White cardstock, and these are 3 centimeters by 15 centimeters each. And so what I've done is cut 2 out because I want it to be extremely solid. So I'm just going to stick those 2 together using some Tombow glue again. Now the next thing that we're going to be cutting out is what I'm calling the hinges. Now these are 3 centimeters by 3 centimeters, and they will be scored at 1 centimeter. So again, they're 3 centimeters by 3 centimeters. There's 2 of those hinges, and each of them is what operates the flap. And so again, they're 3 centimeters by 3 centimeters, and on one of the sides they will be scored at 1 centimeter. Now, a very important step is that once you have scored at 1 centimeter, it's very important that you burnish that scoring point. We really want those to be flowing freely and moving very easily. Okay, so this next step is very important. I'm going to take the piece of cardstock with the designer series paper stuck to the front, and I'm just going to lightly score it 3.5 centimeters from the top and 3.5 centimeters from the bottom. So you can barely see that. I'm just going to turn it around and do the same thing. That's 3.5 centimeters from the bottom. And so that allows for 3 centimeters between the 2 middle lines. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to score in the opposite direction. The first scoring line is at 1 centimeter, and the second scoring line is going to be at the midpoint, which is at 7.2 centimeters. Now I'm only scoring between the two middle lines just to make sure that there are no scoring lines on the front side of the designer series paper. For the next step, I will take a Stanley knife, or for our North American friends, a box cutter, and a steel ruler. And what I'm going to do is use the Stanley knife to cut a thin slit to allow the hinge that we cut in an earlier step to be able to pass through. So I've cut along the line in the middle, and now I'm going to cut along the line at the end using the box cutter and the Stanley knife. So after I've cut the actual line out, what I'm going to do is cut another line about 1 millimeter away. And so as you can see, I'm holding the steel ruler very tight to ensure that it doesn't move. Underneath my grid paper, I actually have a self-healing grid mat, which is very helpful. So I've done that one, and then you can see I'll do the same thing. So I'll cut a very thin slot, and this will allow the hinge that we made in an earlier step to be able to pass through. Now I'm pretty confident that all 4 of these cuts that I've made have gone all the way through, so I'm just turning over to see that they have been cut through, and they have. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to hold my steel ruler along the line and simply just push the Stanley knife through, and that should be sufficient to cut the 2 slots out. And I'll do it on that side, and then I'll just rotate it 180 degrees and do it on the bottom as well. So then after we've done this, I will have 2 1 millimeter or so thin slots, and you can see they're just falling out like that, and that is exactly the way that we wanted it to work. So now you can see I can add one of those hinges, and that will go in like that, and the other one will go in like that. And so you're starting to see exactly how the mechanism works for the flip. Now something I usually do right at the start of making a card is cut the card base, but I was too excited with making the Menagerie mix-up animals. So I'm going to use a mint macaron card base for this card. I've cut it in half, and I'm just going to score it again in half for that piece. I'm using a piece of A4, so this will be a standard card size. So far this card is going exactly the way I've planned. So I've just inserted the 2 hinges in, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it over, and for this card to work, the pulley has to be adhered like so. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to add some glue. So I'm just using some Tombow. You might use some other type of glue. And so I'm just going to put it on the back of both of those hinges, making sure that I don't bleed any glue anywhere else. And so once I've put the glue on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the pulley in place like so. And that should just take a few seconds to dry. You might be able to just leave it alone, making sure that it's not stuck to anything. And you can see that that is operating independently from the outside, the front of the card. What we want to do now is to ensure that there is enough room for the pulley to work. So what we're going to use is our awesome foam adhesive sheets. So we're basically going to cover the entire back portion of the card with foam adhesive sheets. So I've cut a small little thin bit, which I'm going to place right at the edge there, and then I'm going to cut pieces to fill the entire back of the card. So now we can see the card starting to take shape. We have the pulley, we have the hinges, and we have the card front, which has the two slots in it, and that is how the mechanism is created so that the little animals are able to flip open and closed. So I'm pretty confident that that's all okay. So what I'm going to do now is unstick the dimensional sheets. You have permission to make fun of how many dimensionals I've used on this card. I've basically covered the entire back of the card with dimensional sheets. But this is we need enough room for this pulley to work properly. So this is perfect. And so I'm really happy with how this has turned out. So now I can get the pieces that we cut out in an earlier step, and you can see exactly how this is going to be laid out. So the good thing about these card bases is that you can apply some liquid adhesive glue, and because it takes a few seconds for it to dry, you can actually move it around to ensure that it's in the correct position. So regardless of where the hinges are coming through the card front, that doesn't really dictate the final position of your pieces that you've cut out. These pieces, the white pieces, you actually have a few seconds to move it around and to make sure that they are in the right position. And so you can see me doing that, just wiggling it around to make sure that I'm happy with the final position. And I will hold it there until the glue is dry. I'll just give it a quick test to see that the hinge is working, and the hinge is working okay. So I'm happy with that. Now, I mentioned before that the tail for the kangaroo looks a bit long. I'm just going to give that a quick tail cut, I guess you'd call it. So I've just cut that off, and I want the end to remain the way that it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the base a bit shorter, and I'm just going to again stick that down with some washi tape. So what I'm going to do now is use the same Stitch So Sweetly dies, and I'm going to cut out another frame to act as the ground that the kangaroo is standing on. So I've cut it out, and it looks great. And so the way that I'm going to do it is I'm just going to tear the end of the die cut piece out, and I'm just going to stick that down. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use dimensionals, and I'm going to stick the cute little kangaroo down to the right portion of the card. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on the inside where the koala is going to sit. So I'm going to again apply some dimensionals to the back of the koala in a similar way to what I applied the kangaroo. And I'm also going to tear some of the piece of terracotta tile, tear the other end of the sheet actually, and just stick it to the bottom so that the koala is standing on the same piece of ground. So once that is stuck down, I can apply some glue to the back of that, and I can hold it in place. And again, because it's the liquid glue, there's a few seconds of wiggle space where you can just slightly move it around and make sure that it's directly back to back with the other piece, so that it's not the other piece is not visible from the front. So I'm just going to hold that in place until it's dry. Now the final part of this card is the sentiments on both the front and the inside front. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stamp the "You Got This" with Versamark, and I'm going to use white embossing powder, and you can see that I've done that. I'm going to cut that out using a smaller size from the Stitch So Sweetly die, and you can see that I've done that. Now I just want the white embossing to pop out a bit more, So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some sponge daubers using mint macaron ink, and I'm just going to gently apply that around the sentiment. I really like the effect of using the sponge daubers over that. So one of the final steps for the front of the card is to stick that down, and I'm going to stick that down using, you guessed it, dimensionals. Can you guess how many I'm going to use on this small piece? I think 6 is enough. I might be able to fit another 2 in there somewhere. No, 6 is enough. I think that's being a bit over the top if I used more than that. Now, the final step is to stamp the inside sentiment. So what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to use the heart from the Ridiculously Awesome stamp set, and we're just going to stamp that at the top. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use a sentiment from the Today's Tiles stamp set, and we're going to stamp that using Memento black ink. Now, using the same piece that we just stamped in the just earlier, we're going to stick this down using some liquid glue, and again, because it's liquid, we have a few seconds of wiggle room where we can make sure that it's straight and so that it's not visible on the outside. So I'm just going to apply some liquid glue directly to the back of the other piece, and I'm going to hold it in place until I'm confident that it's straight and I'm confident that it's dry. And that, my friends, is our project for today. What do you think of the end result? I really like how this kangaroo card turned out. I like the colours of the card. I like how cute it looks with the little baby in its pouch. I also love the original koala card, but I really like how they both turned out. I'd love to see if you have a try of this, and please tag us in any posts that you have where you use this suite, or if you're trying the flip card like this. If you need any of the products used on today's project, please, there's some shopping links in the description, or you can reach out to us and we'd be happy to help you with any of that. Thank you so much for watching our channel. Please click subscribe and click on the bell icon if you haven't already done so you can be notified when we have new content for you. Thank you so much. See you later.